Hi, my name is Jeff Hunter. I'm portfolio manager at the Townshend, Somani, and Hunter Group at Canaccord Genuity. Thanks for joining us today. On the line, we have Dave Townshend, Senior Investment Advisor, Raheem Somani, Senior Investment Advisor at Canaccord Genuity. And we're delighted to also have with us Dr. Joe Geraci from Nurosene and Daniel Gallucci, Chief Science Officer. And with that, I'll just pass it over to Dave. If you have any questions regarding Nurosene, their outlook, please reach out to one of our teammates. We're more than happy to discuss with you, see if the investment's suitable. You can also check out our webpage at mywealthmanager.ca. Thank you and have a great day. Let's get started. Dave.
Well, gentlemen, first of all, Merry Christmas. And I believe we're going to go into a very interesting new year for Nurosene. So what we've asked these gentlemen to do is join us and give us a little bit of background on, who they are, right? Where they are in their journey, right? And where we think the company goes. Most importantly, how does this do good, right? How is this going to, change people's lives and help with mental health issues and a variety of other issues that we'll get into. So Daniel, since we've known you the longest and we started to proceed down this road with you, what I'd just like you to do is sort of outline, who you are and why you are and, why you've taken this path, right? Which I find, we've found what we've seen so far just incredible. So Daniel, maybe start with your education and
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, well, thanks you guys that are on and anybody that potentially is going to listen to this rambling through or shortly after the holidays. I truly appreciate it because for one, I like the ability to come together and it's an evolving sort of thing, David. And as you know, where we originally started, we've kind of just continued to move from there in a great way. And I think a lot of it harks back to just the very simple basic premises of, at the end of the day, it's really the brain that generates mind. It's really the brain that generates behavior. And really, we're on a mission to figure out and do everything we possibly can to figure out how the brain actually does this. And, I think I'm been blessed in terms of what I used to think was almost a detriment to my background, because I kind of came at it through the back door. I was a soccer player at the beginning, then ended up down the route of exercise science in the US and sports medicine, and really had nothing to do with the brain, but that actually ended up laying a really good sort of foundation. So I was trained as an exercise physiologist. And then after that, spending a lot of time working with professional and amateur athletes, realizing that injuries often plague them, led me to the world of osteopathic medicine, which is where I did my initial doctoral training. And really seeing that even when you went into the worlds of rehabilitation medicine, and we were seeing everybody from world-class athletes from every sport imaginable, I've been lucky enough to have been to the Olympic Games, the World Series, the NHL playoffs, the NFL playoffs, and really seeing that at the end of the day, once you got to that higher and higher level, that really it was the brain that was the default sort of factor in terms of like make it or break it, what was going to enable you to win or succeed at that level. And then on the flip side, spending a lot of time with, seeing people with certain types of injuries, and some of these injuries would be from strokes, post-stroke, this would be from a tumor repair post-surgically and things along those lines, and how many sort of commonalities there were. That really then led me down into the world of clinical neuroscience and functional neurology, which I had done at the Carrick Institute first in Georgia. And then, the last number of years back up to Toronto, and then with a group in Kingston where I was working with different sorts of brain imaging. So using fMRI, diffuse tensor imaging, all these fancy sorts of very modern, very scientific brain imaging tools. And again, using that from everybody from professional athletes to people coming right out of or pre-surgery or post-surgery. And really, it really taught me more than anything else that the world of, and that whole time I was still running a private clinic in Toronto, And the world of healthcare was kind of going down a road where, oh, it's great, we're learning all this very interesting stuff. Science was going down a road, academia was going down a certain road where we were figuring out all these things and making all these sorts of discoveries. And then on the flip side, you had sort of the clinical application side of, okay, well, what is it that we're doing for patients? What is it that we're doing for users? What is it that we're doing for people that are struggling with depression or anxiety disorders? And really, it just became, it was bifurcating more and more and more. So, really at the end of it, we were working with, I was doing a research study using, traumatic brain injury, which was basically like a concussion, mild traumatic brain injury. And we were bringing in 15, 16, 17-year-old quote unquote healthy controls. And it was one thing when you start seeing the injuries in people that are smashing their heads all over and over again in youth football players and stuff like that, you'd expect to see it. But then when I started to see in these quote unquote 15, 16, and 17-year-olds abnormal brain activity, abnormal rhythms of the brain, abnormal functional imaging statuses, and these are kids that are quote unquote healthy, it like I still get goosebumps being like, oh my God, like what the hell is going on here? And so that opened up a whole world of investigation and realizing that I was only going to be so limited, stuck in a clinical scenario where I could see 4 or 5 or even 10 patients a day, yet that was only going to be good for that one individual person or those people that I was seeing. We needed an ability to sort of scale how we were looking at the brain differently. And we can get into some of the specifics of that, because again, on the science side, what intrigued me most about Dr. Geraci was not that the brain is, everybody knows the brain is super complex, 85 billion neurons, all these sorts of things, but there are very few people that are looking at the brain in the way that we're starting to see the brain unfold. And we can get into a bit of that, but that was really what intrigued me most about them, was that not only did we need the high level analysis necessary to be able to model all this crazy stuff and turn it into strategies that we can apply to people and democratize it on a very wide level, was we needed the foundation of the people with us that were willing to look at these mysteries of the brain unfolding in a very specific way. And that's what actually, so I went searching for Joe, and lucky enough, a data scientist that I'd worked with prior that is working with us now had introduced me to Joe. And it was literally in that first meeting, I knew that was the group that we needed to work with.
So Daniel, that was about a year ago?
That would have been a year and a half ago now. Yeah.
Really?
When I first met, when I first met Joe, that would have been about a year and a half ago. Yeah, for sure.
Very interesting. So in all this time, you were treating pro athletes,
Mm-hmm.
you were treating amateur athletes, people with
Mm-hmm.
depression, people with concussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a wide spectrum, people coming out of terrible sort of stroke recovery, developmental issues. And again, I would be honest with you, I don't want to lie. I would never, it's massively complex. And I think anybody in my world realizes you're failing most of the time, but you're failing trying to collect information and trying to sort of adjust on the fly and say, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And you're always playing catch up in that way. And it's such a inefficient way of actually trying to, it works for one person because eventually you knock down enough doors, you can figure it out if you're willing to go down that path. And I'm obsessed, so I was willing to do that. But you started over again every single time somebody came in because everybody's so dramatically different. So how do you model the chaotic and dynamic nature of the brain? How do you model the fact that all these things need to be brought into an equation and be able to figure out at least a starting point? So, again, that's what was in clinic. The most frustrating part was that you were always trying to hit this massively quickly moving target. And really, when it came to meeting Joe, and I'd spoken to 20, 30 other, AI machine learning groups. And I think that's kind of the thing, is we just view these terms ubiquitously as like, oh, AI, oh, machine learning. But again, unless those underlying fundamentals are in line with what we were doing, then it wasn't going to work. And really, we come at it a little bit differently, because I don't think anybody really says it out there other than Joe, but I really view the brain as this sort of compressive computational system. It has one goal, and the brain's goal is to predict the future. And how does it do that? Is through action. And while it says, oh, okay, well, that doesn't make sense, or it does, there are very few people in the world of science that have gone through that. Now we're starting to show the science emerge that backs those sorts of sentiments up. But then, as you would know, David, we've discussed this before, you can have science over here, but then what's that gap again? It's like it may take you a decade or 15 years to be able to even bridge that gap. So again, Joe coming at it from the world of pharma, Joe coming at it from the world of neuropsychiatry, Joe coming at it from the world of developmental issues or neurodegenerative issues. It was like, you know, that was exactly what we needed to do to be able to say, okay, the science is this great little starting point, but how do we leverage that and move forward? Because again, science are just little snapshots of a moment in time, but life is like, you know, you're living a movie in 8K. So how do we bridge that gap? And that's where the data comes in. That's where the modeling comes in. That's where the ability to say, okay, it's like we talk about stress all the time. It's like, nobody needs another paper on stress. What we need to know is what is stressful for you versus David versus Joseph versus Raheem versus everybody, because these are highly unique things. So we've got to have this sort of, which I'm super excited about. I don't know if you can tell, it's like this next wave of medicine that really looks at these things on an individual level, but can also then be very helpful on a systemic large scale as well. So, and again, you literally cannot do that without the Joseph Geracis of the world. So that's where it became like super interesting to me.
It's the map.
Yeah, very simple.
Dr. Joe, why don't you just go through you've had a very interesting life journey and been down a number of different roads. So the same question, how did you get a year and a half ago talking to Daniel to say, I think I have the piece that fits?
Yeah, no, sure. I'll take you through a brief version of my life story. I'll tell you the end, when I met Daniel, I was in a position in my life where I spent decades becoming a very modern scientist, right? And also a very modern entrepreneur, someone who's thinking, how do I bridge the science and create a product that can really change the world and, make my investors a pile of money. And what I did was modern scientists now are no longer these siloed, you used to have physicists and chemists and biologists. So I decided at a very young age to be able to integrate as much as possible and to become a bridge to clinicians like Daniel. So I've worked with doctors for a long time and other clinicians. And that's why when I met Daniel, I'm like, this guy's vision is just crazy enough to actually, really create something amazing. So briefly, I'll tell you, David, about my journey. When I was really, really young, I was always interested in medicine and physics. I'm talking like as a little kid. I built a lie detector when I was 11 years old, and I started winning science fairs as a strange autistic kid, right? And it eventually what happened was I got it. My parents bought me a computer when I was around 12 years old, and I tried to teach it how to talk, how to think. And I had the realization back in 1985 that I can never program this thing to become an intelligent, agent, right? I had to leave this thing on and create a paradigm in which it will learn, right? And so this is me at 11, 12 years old. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the way, right? And that's basically the paradigm of machine intelligence and AI. It's like you have a system that can an empty vessel that can organize information, which is what you are, right? You're this vessel that, you have this capacity and we leave you on long enough and you get to become, this amazing guy like Daniel or you, right? And then what happened was I ended up starting to hack myself with weightlifting, and I became fascinated with our ability to alter our physiology. I became extremely strong. I was bench pressing over 400 pounds by the time I was 17, 18 years old and, squatting 600 pounds. And this, I think this influenced me a lot. And then what I did was I became very interested in medicine and math. So what I ended up doing was I focused on mathematics eventually. And I ended up doing a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in mathematical physics. And while I was doing my PhD, I started a great scientist out at University of Southern California named Daniel Lidar. He used to be part of University of Toronto. He was working on quantum computation. So this next level of like merging quantum physics with computation. And he gave me this task to figure out, what are the outer limits of this computation? And the US government found out that I was doing this stuff and they liked it. And so I got invited to Los Angeles and I went to the University of Southern California. So I was shared between University of Toronto Math and University of Southern California Viterbi Engineering, which was fascinating. So I got to work on some really crazy cool problems about the outer limits of algorithms. And then I took this background and I had a lot of options because of, the high profile nature of the military being involved. And I ended up coming back to Toronto and joining Princess Margaret Hospital. And that's where I started focusing on building this bridge. I was looking for Daniel, right? So I spent a couple of years doing a postdoc in oncology, and then another couple of years doing a postdoc in machine learning for medicine, and then another couple of years doing another postdoc in neuropsychiatry. So as you can see, I was merging for about 20 years, and merging mathematics and different aspects of medicine. And ultimately, what I started to realize was that our journey into trying to cure these diseases and to treat people either through apps, and it required the ability to start seeing the patient populations accurately. So David, you're talking about how all the math and stuff is complicated. It all comes down to something simple. We like to give names to things because it's, to diseases, because it's very hard to categorize. So we say things like ovarian cancer, we say things like Alzheimer's disease, even TBI, Daniel's an expert on, traumatic brain injury. But as you can imagine, all of these things are actually mosaics of health. There's different types of Alzheimer's, there's different types of TBI, there's different types of cancer. Even though it looks the same, it's not. The driving mechanisms are all different. And so what I ended up doing, as you guys know, in AI, in pharma, the big thing now, probably the main focus is creating drugs. And I was part of that initiation when I was just a scientist. I helped some of these companies start and go. But my decision was different. I said, you know what, I have a view now. I have a way of building a mathematical method that can handle the heterogeneity of the diseases. In other words, I'm going to actually reveal this mosaic so a clinician like Daniel can attack it better, so that our app starts to get to know what's driving someone's behavior, or their return to the app, or treatments much better, right? Because we're all very different. There's no average. That's kind of what this Netramark business was focused on, is this idea of average. And the way we did these, the way we view our patients is really, really rough. We need a much more precise perspective. And so I kind of designed the mathematical paradigm to do this in unison with machine learning on one side, all the data science, and with clinicians like Daniel on the other side. And so happy to dive in more, but that's basically the journey. You're on mute.
There, I figured it out. So here we are, and we have an app. And we have an app that I've used for a year. And I find my own anxiety levels, and I find my stress greatly diminished to the point where I don't use it, I feel it. And how do these two pieces fit together? Daniel, I'll ask you first. That as I understand the data that you first looked at, Dr. Joe, from the users, you were able to identify some people with sleep conditions. From a very, to me, I go, how do you get that jump from you know, I'm not a doctor. My clients aren't doctors on the vast extent, but how do you get, you know, Daniel, how did that unlock to you, right? You must have looked at that and went, wow, like here we have very limited data from, you know, a small set of people, and we've identified something that they didn't know they had. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, you know, David, I think, you know, that was, it basically was just a little, you know, Joe threw this little teaser at me because I was the same as you. I was like, but how on earth, you know, and it made so much sense to me once we dug into it after, but that was exactly the point, was almost, you know, we, again, in the world of data science and stuff, I think what becomes a little bit tough to reconcile for people is now there's all of a sudden so much data out there. There's stuff from wearables. There's stuff that you can get from genetics information. You can get stuff from stuff that you can collect via an app. And there's all this stuff out there. I think harking back to, you know, some of the early, you know, some of the lovely early evolutionary biologists and people, I think what's often been lost is just the ability to observe correctly. So with the ability to observe before even the necessity to act, you start to really unravel these dynamics in a very interesting way. So just looking at a host of variables together, sleep, are people able to fall asleep? Are they staying asleep? Are they having trouble waking up? And these are relatively low resolution. Like you'll see, and I appreciate you mentioning that you've had some good benefit, which a lot of people have had in these first versions of the app. You know, I still view sort of the version that's coming out early this year, 2022, as like the first real sort of like consumer facing version of it, where it's like we're starting to get into a little bit more resolution. And there, I can't even imagine what we're going to unfold, because again, it's just the ability to look at variables, ask people some questions like a good clinician would in a situation, make them specific to that individual, and then be able to look at these underlying patterns, because there's patterns to everything. There's patterns to everything in biology. And we sometimes, again, back to Joe's point, we sometimes like to think that these things exist in very different departments. So you're at the anxiety department. This is the, the hippocampus does memory, and the amygdala does emotion, and then the prefrontal cortex does executive functioning. And the reality of it, David, is it all does it all. And what that does is make it very complex. But then you need the guys, again, like Joe, that have the models to say, okay, I understand that premise. I understand that that's how the brain is working. Very different from a lot of other people, which I give Joe credit for. So how do we strip through that and then be able to pull this stuff out? And then again, once Joe gets that, the data comes back to us, and then it's like, oh, great. Okay, if these people are having sleep issues, it's like, okay, then what? Because again, it's unfortunately, it's very different than a science project or doing an academic project. And there's tons of those out there, but it's like, no, but we're focused on the user. It's like, how do you put them at the center of their own health and say, okay, with that information, how do you act on it? Because if you can't act on it, like, who cares really? So if you're like, okay, if you're having this sort of issue here, and then Joe's been able to unravel some sort of link to like, okay, let's dig into the gastrointestinal system, because they may have some sort of GI stress that's precluding them from sleeping correctly, and they don't even know it. It's like, that's exactly that next wave of medicine, getting to the point of asking questions that you don't even know you have yet. And that is where I think the real sort of like, that's the goal for me there, David, for sure.
So do I say predictive medicine? Do I say that what Dr. Geraci
Predictive preventative medicine is a big part of what this app is going to be able to do. I mean, you can imagine now we're going to be able to, as people come in and start to integrate their the different aspects of their life with the app, we're going to have a resolution into, eventually what will happen is models are going to emerge, which are going to catch things before they become severe, or that are going to prepare you, right? That's the magic. Like, imagine being able to do scans without scans. Imagine to be able to do genetics without genetics. That's the way to think of this, right? This is going to be able to provides so much information on how to optimize who you are as a human, a better you, right? And what Daniel, he's an expert on human behavior. What does it take to get someone to modulate their behavior? And you can't have this very interrogative system that you always have to be on.
Yeah.
It has to be simple. And that's what I think investors on that side should be very excited about. Right.
Dr. Joe, on that, right, from a standpoint, so your mathematics is looking for patterns. You're looking for patterns. You're looking for repetitive patterns in different people, right, that you can identify.
It's so look, at the bottom line, all of these, everything we call AI now is basically, I mean, I'm going to be very frank here. It's it's basically a set of correlations that emerge that allow the machine to say if, then, right? And what I'm trying to move towards, and that's great. Our team has, the team at Netromark that, merged with Nurosene has that expertise, right? We have some amazing people there. And you're right, these are patterns. What I've been focusing on in the last 4 years, and then I spent the investors' money on, Netromark, is to develop a system that's a bit more sophisticated, which is what's really causing something, right? What's causal? It's not just correlation, it's causal. If you are driving by and you see a cat sitting inside of a dent in the street, right? You're not going to say that cat caused that dent, right? There's something else caused it. And you have the brain power to say, oh, the cat's kind of just likes that little spot. And I think that's what we're trying to emerge, right? Out of all the complex mathematics I've been trying to push into the system, there's that side, but there's another side that people don't talk about, which is how opaque a lot of these machine learning methods are. You need someone like Daniel or the group that I'm working with at these different pharma companies or hospitals. You need someone to be able to look at what the machine is deciding and to say, that's nonsense. There's something's wrong with that model before you push it. You need what we call augmented intelligence. You need the machine and the expertise to work together. And that's one of the amazing things we have. So once this data comes in, we can actually lock down certain things that then become automatic and grow and allow us to start gathering the most complete perspective of human health ever. I'll give you an example of how smart these systems can be and how stupid they can be, okay? So at Netromark, we have more than just the AI that we're going to be using in Nurosene. We have a system that actually starts to figure out the systems biology behind the disease. And that's that mosaic I'm talking about. And pharma companies are very interested in this because it helps them understand their patient populations better. It helps them understand their clinical trials. I mean, if you can reduce a clinical trial by 2 years by reducing failure, that's worth $1 billion right there, right? Like, of course, these companies invest massive amounts. And that's where we're moving towards. But I'll give you an example. We put an aging data set from a 2-year-old to a 96-year-old. I had skin samples, and we had the genetics from these skin samples, okay? So we let the machine just cook, right? No Daniel, no Dr. Joe, just go. Here's the data. And the only label we gave it was these people, a ridiculous label. We said, these people are over 50 and these people are under 50. Go, tell us what you learned. Treat aging like a disease. And it came back after about an hour and a half, and it started telling me about telomeres, mitochondria, and senescence. These, Daniel knows, these are the pillars of aging. So this thing taught itself in 90 minutes about aging and already had insights into how you can drug it, how you can, whatever. And that's a very exciting, part of modern medicine now, is how do you, how you go about thinking about aging. But I'm not telling you this for that. I'm just trying to tell you how sophisticated the machine is able to do by building this mosaic And this stupid label, this over 50, under 50, were able to open the box and understand why it did that. And you know why it did it? It's because there was a bunch of people between 80 and 96 that the machine was able to discover, even though the labels were stupid. See, and that's what Daniel's saying. It goes beyond the labels. It says, you know what? I don't, whatever. Okay, you're guiding me, but there's something really causal happening. And that's how I was able to do it. And then, you know, the opposite happens sometimes too. Somebody left in the wrong variable in a diabetes project we did, and a physician caught it, says this is wrong because this is the flexibility we have. So that now back to the app, that's great for the pharma. Now for the app, what happens is, as we make this app, you know, super interesting for people to engage in, it's the derived value, not only in their own life, but in what we can use, what we can learn from these people about how to move forward in medicine and get rid of this average thinking, right? Each individual, like it's true precision medicine that starts to emerge, right? And that's what this is. That's what this is really about. Yeah. How do you improve people's lives through the app? And how do you gain a perspective on this mosaic of human health so that you can take that information and start saying, you know what? This pharma company over here can use this. This drug design company over here can use this, and so forth.
That's exciting. Can you comment briefly on the last news that you made with Dr. Newton? I find this mind machine thing at MIT like past fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, what he's doing there and what he's done in his career, and the idea that he's coming to you specifically to help him in his research is, to me, I look at that and go, wow, like this is one of the most cutting edge projects I've ever read about.
Yeah, Newton, I mean, Newton is an amazing person. You know, he and I are very similar in that we both were very excited about math. We're both very excited about neuroscience. We're both excited about oncology, and we integrated all this. And we're both excited about Daniel, right? Daniel is this clinician who's at the edge and saying, okay, there is a way to help many, many people at once and not just 10, 20 people.
The dumbest of the three, the dumbest.
No. So then what Newton is doing, so there's a couple of things. So he has ideas about how you can literally stimulate the brain by implanting certain things through the nose and actually placing these things on the brain, and also through a new type of EEG, right? So it's really pioneering work. What's missing is a guidance system, right? So, you know, if you're in a war and you have a missile launcher, you need to know how to guide. You can't just send your missiles everywhere. That's kind of where we are with medicine now, right? And it's what I was telling you before, that mosaic is basically a guidance system, right? And so what we seek to do together, right, is, you know, come together and to utilize the Netra AI, which has that ability I was just telling you about. What's very important about the human mind is that it knows when it doesn't know, right? We probably BS each other a lot, right? But we know when we don't know something, right? And this is, you know, some people are terming it deep forgetting, right? AI becomes smarter when it's honest, when it says, oh, I'm not going to try to model everybody. I'm going to try to understand something from the data that's really concrete. And that's what we have in Netra AI, and that's what Newton really liked, right? Because this provides a way to start understanding how to guide his system, because you can actually change the settings, right? It's very simple to understand. You have a bunch of dials, you can alter them, and some people are going to respond to these dial settings and other people are going to respond to other dial settings. So it's figuring out those maps, which is what you said right from the beginning. You got it right away, right? We develop maps of human health.
Yeah, and David, I think just on Joe's point there, I think what becomes important to understand, because one of the things people have even reached out to me since hearing about the project and thinking, oh, well, this is insane, it's futuristic, it's kind of crazy, is this Neuralink, is this, you know, and I think what becomes important to understand, I think in a very basic way, is that as a human species, our goal and our biology is built in a way where we're just constantly building these sorts of informational architectures from one generation to the next. So we need to be able to have greater resolution to be able to figure out these problems. The way we've been doing it has been predicated on 500 years, going back to the sort of like the Christian conquests of like, okay, we're going to do this and then watch how this reacts. And then philosophers had taken that, and then contemporary psychology had taken this same model. And really, we're starting to see now that the brain is actually very different. So what we need to do is we need to be able to peer into the brain to be able to get better resolution to how it's actually operating. And then what Joe would be too modest to say, and something that I kind of tell people all the time, is that I kind of think a bit about, and again, I'm just like the sports guy, but if you're in a packed stadium of 100,000 people, and then you put a microphone in, so you put that microphone in and you go listen to the conversation of 2 or 3 people, you can have a very nice, interesting sort of like synopsis of what that conversation is. But now you don't have the other 99,998 people. And what you need to do is be able to have a bunch of microphones all over the place so that you can be able to figure out these conversations. And then you need to be able to have the data to take all those conversations and say, okay, what is nonsense? Because some of this isn't important. What is the useful stuff? How do we give that back to somebody that helps determine whether or not that's useful? How do we put it into practice? And then goes back to, how do we observe? How do we observe if this shit is really working in real time or not? Because again, it's like we have all these theories and you do all these things. Biology's complex. We think we can outsmart nature. We think we can outsmart biology. We cannot do so. We need to be able to figure out, how do we work with it? So this is, again, that was the most exciting part for me with that project, is like the peering in with greater resolution and then the ability to reverse engineer that back into like those potential useful strategies, which is, again, for me is almost otherworldly in terms of where the medicine, compared to where the medicine is right now.
Yeah, and the, this is another thing I want to make clear is I've been focused many years on integrating different types of data, right? We have methods that are not AI. They're mathematical methods that literally denoise the type of data that Daniel's dreaming about getting from this app. That's the other dream part of this is I've been building this stuff because I used to work in trying to predict the way people respond to antidepressants, for example. I spent years doing that. And some of that data was complex time series data. And then I had this realization. It was like Daniel and I were meant to meet, right?
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, I can actually integrate. And the other side of that is this. My dream is always to be able to start to run programs where we don't just look at genetics. We don't just look at MRIs. We don't just look at, poop, literally poop microbiome, right? What we do is we integrate all these things to actually provide a real snapshot into what's happening into these diseases. And it's that integration which is the future. And like, I'll give you an example. We won an award for an ALS project we did, earlier this year. And I guess everything is earlier this year since we're at the end of the year. But earlier this year, we got recognized for our contribution to ALS. And what was amazing was, I'm not a clinician. Like, I help clinicians. I've learned to work with clinicians, but this was an example where I was able to actually meet some people with ALS, devastating disorder. And that's when I realized that this whole nature versus nurture conversation, right, Daniel, we've been having for like, a century.
Yeah.
We're in a position now where we can actually start to explore this, right? There seems to be, our human health seems to be predicated upon certain vulnerabilities that lie underneath genetically, and then the things we do to ourselves as we grow up, right? And this is where the app can start doing miracles, right? You can actually start extracting habits and things like this. And at the same time, there's a way to measure these things that you do to yourself through something we call methylation, right? These are things that literally change depending on whether you smoke or drink or whether you were a Jewish person in a Nazi camp, right? These things actually change your genetics and can have generational effects. And this is the view we're missing. We talk about it, but now we're getting to a point where I can integrate all this, really start understanding things and delivering real value to people. Muted. You're muted.
There we go. So in the interest of time, we don't want to take too much time. You guys are very busy men, and we appreciate your effort. But I'll ask you one question, both of you, in closing, is to say, what does Nurosene look like a year from now? Daniel? In your opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's I go back to the very basic premise of what's worked for me in clinic, again, in all those sorts of environments. And when I've been most effective is when I would consider myself a coach or sort of like a health companion more than anything. So I'm able to take in a lot of, because again, my network has been lucky to know the Joes and stuff of the world, that going pre-app, pre-Nurosene, I was lucky enough to know that I was never going to be the smartest guy in the room. So I always surrounded myself by what I thought were. And taking in a bunch of information to be able to be sort of an adjunct to put people at the center of their own sort of health journey and make them realize that their overall health was the sum of what they did on a daily basis. And really, I just think that the app needs to become that. The app in a year from now, I'm hoping, is this ability to sort of aggregate all these different sorts of things and be a real-time, real-world, actionable companion for people that says, okay, with all that science and stuff out there, COVID, this Omicron, Johnocron, whatever we're going to call it, how do we decipher through all the noise? How do we provide what we think is going to be the useful things that you need to do to be able to keep you at the center of your health journey moving forward? And again, that's still a hypothesis. How do we observe that in real time and be able to be honest enough to interact with that dynamically to push you forward? That, for me, would be where we are in a year from now.
Yeah, and so I'd say, look, as the chief scientific officer of this awesome group, I'm going to support, like, we're all here because we believed in Daniel, we believed in his vision. And I specifically saw this vision and other people coming to me with it way back, but now's the right time to do it. And so I'm going to support the way the app is going to evolve and the way the data is going to come together, and also, push on the side of how do we make this as exciting as possible for our users. And on the other side is Netramark is going to continue to help pharmaceutical companies enter into this next generation of medicine and drug development, right? That's what we've had an opportunity to demonstrate the power behind the paradigm, the Netra AI paradigm. And I think this is going to continue now from what I've been seeing, right? And now with our new president, Mark Smithies of Netramark, we're drilling down and getting this to go. So that's what I see in Nurosene, being this really beautiful integrated company that's starting to make some money. Muted again.
Oh, there we are. Okay, I got it. So, as I say, Daniel, I like to refer to myself as the dumbest man in the room. So thank you for the education. I believe that our support will continue. I've been involved in a lot of very interesting companies, and I've never seen such a group of accredited people all looking at, and I see this as a cause, that you guys really are, all about the outcome, and the outcome is having people have better lives. So we're overjoyed to be involved here for the last year and a half. And Raheem, do you have anything you want to add here? Questions you want?
No, they summed it up very well. There's a clear path and a clear vision, and you have some very prominent, intelligent individuals who are enterprising to something that could be very exciting. The accelerating opportunity of artificial intelligence with the science of what we know and the ability to look to the future and integrate data and the whole world data set per se into solutions to help solve some of the questions that we've always have are very exciting to look at. And then seeing it from an investment point of view, there's nothing more gratifying than making money, but also being part of something that could be much larger than the average investment. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Jeffrey?
Thank you.
No, I love it. I've seen the effects once upon a time when I learned how to golf and could play it well, and saw the benefits of focusing on the brain and studying with it, and just how it rippled to the rest of my life. I'll never forget it. And it's something that I found, just like going to the gym, it's got to be ongoing. And for a lot of us, some get into more difficulties than other, but having something that everyone can have access to, not just people who are trying to compete on the top level or have the resources and benefits for it. That's what gets me excited. Ever since I saw that, it really, it's had a huge effect in my life. And so just to know that we could be part of something that could have an impact on someone else, it got me excited as from an investment standpoint, because those are the ones that you remember. You know, dollars and cents mean a lot for a short period of time, but impact is forever. So I'm really excited about this. I'm excited to see the app in commercial sense. I'm excited to get my friends in it and see the benefits that it has for them. I've already, as Dave mentioned earlier, you can already see the effects on the exercises in the app already, and it's only just the start. So I'm very excited about the path forward.
Data coming from the Yukon will be cool. Cold shock proteins. What does that do for brain?
That's a cold shock.
Well, the only science experiment that I learned was that it's pretty hard to snowboard at -37. So
there you go. There you go. We don't need a paper for
I
that.
just stuck to the snow. So.
Crazy.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We're just, we're very excited to be involved. Sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time, and you meet people and you end up knowing them for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're involved because you think what they're doing makes so much sense, right? That you want to be involved.
Yeah. Then that's why I turn it back to you guys. I truly appreciate it, because, not knowing as a clinician getting into this sort of thing, like it's been an amazing experience with you guys, and just even the conversations we've had offline, but just to see sort of how you guys have aligned with what we're trying to do is just truly phenomenal. So thank you guys. And I'm excited for the future.
Yeah. Let's look forward to a great new year, and
Can't wait.
happy holidays to you both. Thanks for taking the time.
You too.
And we'll touch base soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.